We've got a beautiful February day going here. Looks like we're going to get an early spring in our area. I'm going to go ahead today and get started on this landscape bed that you see behind us. We're going to get ready for spring, into the growing season. We'll be cutting back some of the herbaceous perennials, do a little bit of pruning in there. We'll even talk about some of the mulch that we're using and what's going to happen to some of the different trees in here as they progress, as they grow. So we'll be talking about a variety of different things as we go through each plant one by one. Okay, quick overview on the plants we're going to talk about. That's an autumn brilliant serviceberry. We've got an Oregon green, Austrian pine there. The bigger tree right there, that's a showy mountain ash, a columnar Norway spruce in the back there. This is a buckeye tree. And then some of the different perennials we're going to be working on. Salvia, one of the tougher perennials, does very well. Different little procumbens spruce. We've got some tiger eye sumac coming up here. And then we'll finish up towards the end of the bed, that savin juniper. We'll show you how I'm just trying to keep that natural vase shape, catmint. And then one of the Japanese tree lilac varieties. And there's a few more we'll talk about tucked in behind this Austrian pine. Let's get started talking about the autumn brilliant serviceberry. This is a really good small version tree, only going to get up into that 15 to 20 foot. You'll often see it sold as a clump form. I've seen it also trained as just a single stem, but it's always going to want to revert with some of those different suckers. So multi-stemmed is a great way to grow it. Now this one, about 5 years ago, we had a hailstorm baseball, and this thing got beat up pretty good. And throughout the years, over the last 5 seasons, we're constantly seeing occasional branches have been dying out. So I'm assuming that injury caused canker, and then eventually you just don't have enough transport of water and nutrients. So we've been pruning that out, lifting up these lower branches. I want to continue to have that ornamental trunkage exposed. But what a great plant to give food for the birds. We don't really get any June berries out of this, or service berries. Sometimes those names are interchangeable, but they pretty much gobble them all up. Oregon Select Austrian Pine. Had some winter injury a couple seasons. You can see up on the top there, we've got a leader there that we've got to prune that out. We're getting quite a bit of needle shed on this every year now, and that's okay. We'll just kind of rake that up, and eventually what I want to do with this, the effect I'm looking for is similar to what you see here. Maybe not this big or dramatic, but I want to lift up, exposing all that ornamental trunkage. Look at that. You're going to be able to see through. You see some of the different things that are happening in there. So right now it's kind of blocking some of the view. I'm not going to do it in this project, but maybe into next spring. Okay, we'll move into now where we actually do have to get some work done. And right down here we've got the blue salvia. Now I originally just planted one. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. With the salvia, one of the toughest perennials out there as far as surviving, beautiful flowering, brings in the bumblebees. But it is going to do some self-seeding, and I've actually had to come in here with a shovel and dig out areas of it where I just didn't want it to establish that much. One of the benefits of leaving the salvia through most of the winter is the stems become pretty brittle, and they'll actually just kind of break off. It's usually, though, a bit of a combination between a little bit of just making a break and then using your pruners to cut the rest. There's quite a few different salvia varieties. Most of them are in the blue and the violet colors. White salvia is also one that's sold. Now, how far back? You could go all the way to ground. It's not that practical to me to do that. I tend to be in kind of that 2 to 4 inch range. I personally don't mind leaving just a little bit of a stem. Let's quick look at this mountain ash behind us, the showy mountain ash. One of the things about the showy mountain ash, incredibly hardy tree. It does get these suckers that come in on mine every season. Showy mountain ash, or all the mountain ash, are actually, they're fairly susceptible to fire blight, which is a bacteria. And if you make that fresh cut anywhere on the tree during the active growing season, you run the risk of an insect having that bacteria on its skin. It stops by to that fresh cut, and you can introduce that fire blight into the tree. So I'm pretty cautious with this one. I tend to just only do this when it's completely dormant. Before the spring rains is usually what's recommended to do this kind of pruning. But you can't beat it. If you take a look at these spring flowers, you get into a nice foliage, the berries into the fall, and then look at this beautiful fall color on this thing. It's just awesome. By the way, the 3 main tools that you need to do this type of work when you're landscaping gardening, just excellent pruners, FELCOs. I use Bahco, this is my Loppers, great tool, I believe still made out of Sweden with the hardened steel. So the Hedge shears. Now, could you leave these suckers? Yeah, you know, you could, and this would just become a multi-trunk tree over time. I'm not sure if this is grafted, so you might have a different rootstock, different look completely. Let's talk about cranberry cotoneaster real quick. Cranberry cotoneaster, this is a nice arching, lower growing, shouldn't get more than 18 inches to 2 feet tall. I've had a lot of dieback on this. Even though it's labeled zone 4, I usually lose all the tops. This one has also come up in different spots. And then if you look up here, Weigela, this is another nice spring bloomer, a lot of different leaf color Weigelias, a lot of different flower color ones. When I first put this bed in, these trees back here, the Colorado spruce, you know, they were pretty small, but as they've grown, man, they take their fair share of moisture, nutrients. So this is becoming a survival of the fittest bed. It has to be drought tolerant, tough plants. I think the Weigelas are going to need just a little bit more moisture than this is getting here. So it's not doing great. It's kind of hanging in there. Okay, what else we've got growing back here? We've got a northern gold forsythia. Now that's grown mostly for its yellow flowers. On this one, the shrub's hardy, but the flower buds are not. I typically never see yellow flowering on this unless the snow cover is high enough. Nice coppery twig on that northern gold forsythia. Adds a little bit of winter interest. A fern leaf peony. And this is one of the plants that we got from my father-in-law's yard. After he died, we dug some up, but along with it, we brought in some snow on the mountain. So we have a nice reminder, nice memorial of a plant that reminds us of Hank. They're expensive little plants. All we have to do in this is cut back that dead stem on it. The snow on the mountain doesn't look like anything even living here. But oh yeah, that'll come. It'll come strong. I'm leaving those stems couple inches, provide a little bit of extra support for the new growth. This is an upright Carigana, also called pea shrub. This is Sutherland, been trained as a tree. Normally you're going to see that as a shrub. And we get a little bit more into the shade here. This is a bird's nest spruce. And yeah, I've had a lot of needle casts dead in there. It's possible it got spider mites. It should be able to handle how dry it is here. Here's how our bird's nest looked just a couple years ago. So that dieback, it's not getting any better. Kind of hanging in there. Maybe that's why it gets the name bird's nest. Kind of has a bird's nest look to it, if you ask me. And then over here, I think in a different video, I've referred to this as goldfinger potentilla. I looked it up, it's Dakota sunspot. What I normally recommend on potentillas, and I've got a couple videos I'll put in the description you can look at that I've done different pruning projects on potentilla. I usually recommend, if somebody asks me, what should I do? And I just say every spring or late winter, give it a haircut. Take off a few inches. That's going to encourage new growth when it starts again, better flowering. This one I have left for a couple years. I often want to just experiment and see, well, what's the difference of just leaving it compared to shearing it? It also has, you know, the spent flower or seed head. I find it kind of showy, but they can start looking pretty ragged and just a little bit, I don't know what's the name for the potentillas that are left. They're gnarly. We are going to give this one a haircut. We'll take off about 8 inches on it just to freshen it up a little bit, and that'll encourage that new growth. And if you've got, you know, a good sharp head shears, like this doesn't take long at all. As you get into the beefier stems of a potentilla, they do have a tough stem to cut, but these smaller ones, no problem. Here we've got star power juniper. Junipers do great in dry areas. This is the chinensis species, so it's got a really spiny, kind of a waxy bloom. This one's picking up a winter color here, kind of a bronzy, but once that flushes out in the spring, it'll have a rich bluish green color. And then back here we've got Russian sage. We're just going to cut back these stems. They can almost become like a shrub, but they're not. They're herbaceous perennial, but again, a very tough plant. That was actually planted as a little single stem sprig that I dug out of somebody's yard one fall when I was cleaning up and they didn't want it anymore. So it's come back nice there. It does great in a very dry area. Beautiful purple flowers. Bumblebees love it. The Russian sage, be careful. Yeah, they can do some self-seeding. You can see we've got a couple little ones coming up here, so if you don't want that. And way back when I first put this bed in, this was at one time a Royal Frost birch. I planted that Royal Frost birch right here. That's where the stump is. You know, these spruce trees were so much smaller, and I wasn't even paying attention that a birch eventually is going to be too dry for it here. Well, when a birch is stressed, the bronze birch borer usually shows up. And an insect, whether it be a pheromone that the tree gives off, they're drawn to stressed trees. And it got that birch borer. Top half died out. I didn't want it to spread to a couple other birch, which that's what happened there. That's why we put that Carigana tree in there. A little bit smaller, never going to have to compete for space, takes it incredibly dry, get a nice yellow flower on it. So we're adjusting, we're going with the flow on what happens in the landscape. Just react accordingly as your plants grow up. And we're coming up on a Norway spruce, and it's really starting to kick out some nice height. We had some deer came in about 5 years ago into the area that you see right here, and they really kind of went after, and it's been really slow to recover. So injury like that on the evergreens, it takes them a long time to rebound, and oftentimes they never do rebound. They just don't get that new growth when they've been severed. What we might do with this eventually, since we're going to have a little competition from this mountain ash here, I might prune this up, make it just a smaller tree. And that's a nice tall Norway right down here. We've got one of the dwarf Norways, Tampa Norway. That made one of the videos called the 7 Dwarfs. And right next to this columnar Norway spruce, we've got a beautiful Prince of Wales creeping juniper. Very nice winter color. Kind of picks up a bronzy. You can see when it's shaded back here, maybe that's not coming in on the camera. It's holding that green quite a bit better. But as we come around the corner here, let's go back out to the front. That bronzy color compared to that summer color, which is such a different rich green. The creeping junipers, like the Prince of Wales, if you've got soil or mulch below them, they're going to self-layer in. And this thing, it is really taking up some territory now. And I'm just letting it meander through the different rock work here. And that's one of the main goals. I don't want to lose this effect here. What can happen when you plant junipers around rock, they grow quickly. You kind of forget about it. Before you know it, you've got a scenario like you see here. This is a rock wall, completely covered up. If I were the caretaker on this, I probably would have done some pruning just like this, where you leave some of the area exposed and keeping it pruned back to create that effect. Prince of Wales juniper, just a really durable, tough juniper. I'm not afraid to walk on them just a little bit, these junipers. You don't want to go crazy. There's a prickly pear. Cactus, yeah, cactus up in the northern Great Plains. This one's got a nice little flower, yellow flower in the spring. Back here we've got miscanthus grass. We're going to go ahead and get that cut back as well. We'll probably break out the Hedge shears. Here we've got a procumbens, Colorado spruce. I'm working on a video, put together a collection of I think about 15 different unique Colorado spruce. You know the drill. Hit subscribe, notification if you want to catch that in the future. This cactus has kind of died out in certain spots, kind of moving its way along. I don't know a whole lot about cactus. As far as I know, this is a, ouch, oh. Okay, let's see if this goes a little bit smoother with these gloves on. They're starting to intertwine. This is getting to be a difficult area to maintain. Not only is that juniper rooting in to the surface, making it more difficult, we really have to stay on top of this every year now. I'm hoping that cactus works its way out a little bit. Here's a summer wine 9-bark. We can look at the comparison between what happens when you grow something in a dry environment compared to a wet environment. This summer wine that you see here, planted about the same time as this group of summer wine that you see here, and the big difference, we've got again these spruce trees to contend with, and they just take all the moisture. This is seriously, I don't think I've ever pruned it. Maybe one time I cut back some growth, but it only grows about 18 inches a year, and it just kind of stalls there. And that's because of the dry environment. 9-barks will take it dry. Even if a plant can tolerate it, it definitely slows them down. I'm actually kind of glad. I wouldn't want a summer wine to get 6 to 8 feet tall here, so it's working out beautifully for me to get this purple foliage. We'll make quick work of the miscanthus grass with the Hedge shears. We'll go through and we'll just clip all of this. We've got a video I did also on some different ornamental grasses. You can check the description. But this miscanthus, it does have the strong rhizome that it's going to want to get into areas that you just don't want it. So you either have to get in there, shovel them out, kind of spray them back with an herbicide sometimes. But I leave the tops on the grasses whenever I can. And now the flower heads that were there last year, they've already kind of blown off and weathered away. But it's actually quite showy, that brown off the green. Great little winter interest plant. And right in front of that miscanthus, we've got a buckeye. Buckeyes used to be called Ohio buckeyes. The common name now is more often referred to as just buckeye. This eventually could become a really large tree. We're talking up into that 30 to 40 feet. We're going to leave the lower branches on for now, but eventually My guess is we're going to be training those up quite a bit higher. That'll allow us to continue to see the understory, the different stonework we talked about, the different plants. We're not going to wait too long to make those cuts, but when you do leave those lower lateral branches on a main trunk, that creates strength within that trunk. So I don't rush it to be pruning those branches off. You don't want to have that tree where it's so top heavy. You want to let those branches create that strength in there and then work them up over time. This is the straight species, Aesculus glabra, so we're not seeing the beautiful red fall color that you can get with something like this prairie torch. I've got this in another area. Gorgeous red fall color, but this is pretty much just the yellows. But I'm looking forward to this thing getting quite a bit bigger. And behind us here on this Bahco, we've got the procumbent spruce we briefly mentioned a little bit ago. Here's the effect I'm looking for on that thing. I want it to be able to drape over all this different rock and mulch work. Taking its time though, again, the dry conditions have really slowed it down. But back behind us, tiger-eyed sumac. And this gets beaten up every year, either by deer or rabbits. And yeah, once again, we're seeing, look at that. Haven't seen many deer this year, so that's likely all rabbit damage. They're just chewing it back. Tiger-eyed sumac. I've done other videos, we'll put that in the description. We talk about it, how drought tolerant it is, letting it naturalizing in this area. I got so many beautiful things on the tiger-eyed sumac with that yellow color, the fall colors. Pretty much all the sumac, they can really get aggressive with that underground root system. This is never going to get up to the 6 feet tall that it can because the rabbits and the deer just continue just to pound it back to the ground. But it's drought tolerant, comes back. I get that yellow splash back here that I like. Well, quick mention too, this is Push Norway, a really small plant, probably the slowest growing thing I've got in the entire yard. This also, I think, was on that 7 dwarfs video. This sumac does have a compound leaf. It's a long leaf, kind of a mess. This is more of a bugger to clean up, especially if you had even more stems than this. It can almost become handwork. You can't really get in there with a rake. So if you're one of those people really likes a neat rock bed, you don't want to have any kind of leaf debris left behind, you don't want to consider that. We just cut back all the damaged stems, you know, down to about 6 inches. I just level the whole area, bring it back so it starts over and everything looks kind of uniform as it brings dormancy. As we're working on the cleanup here, notice the yucca. Let's go ahead and talk about that for a moment. This yucca here, it is getting kind of choked out by the tiger-eyed sumac. I kind of tend to forget about it. I might have to transplant it out of here. I've tried yucca in a couple different locations because look at this, man. They really do have a very unique flower. They make a statement. This is a xeriscape area, as we've talked about, with that dry condition. So yucca is just a perfect plant for here. Now, I think some of the improved varieties of yucca, they're probably not as hardy. They just don't perform quite as well as some of the native yucca. I mean, out in the country where it establishes itself, you can't hardly kill yucca. It's tough. So let's go ahead and take a look at Savin juniper. Savin also picks up a little bit of a kind of a bronzy color, not as much as that Prince of Wales, but look at these blue juniper berries. Just outstanding. They start out blue like that. They kind of turn, you know, they'll change colors into that silver. What I'm after on this type of juniper here is exactly this effect where you're getting that fountain shaped look. And all I'm doing every year, and again, you can do this throughout the season. I'll do some of it now, I might do some of it later, but I'm just reaching in and I'm grabbing some of the longer canes. That way it just continues to reduce the overall size of the plant. If you came in here and you just start shearing the whole thing, you end up with kind of some different wild globes, boxes, and it's just not the look that I'm after. Here's a Savin juniper on a commercial location. I did a pruning job. Look at that. It was pretty beat up, kind of out of balance, as you see there in the center. Had quite a bit of winter injury and got it cleaned up nice. So rather than doing that shearing on that plant, we were able to keep its natural form. We're also working every year to keep this rock here exposed. That adds something to the effect of the landscape. Catnip. This is actually a really tough perennial also. Catmint has a lavender blue flower color. It's great at attracting the pollinators. Can get pretty big as far as the width goes, not so much on the height, but a pretty easy plant to clean up every spring. Stems cut really easy. You can do a little bit of that where you're just twisting and breaking to speed it up for you. You might be able to see the amount of dust coming out of this thing as well. Woo! That one is the dustiest we've covered so far. And the tree next to us here, this is one of the Japanese tree lilacs, Snow Dance. I did a video on the Japanese tree lilacs not too long ago. Yeah, the Japanese tree lilac, just so hardy, so durable, so beautiful. One of the later bloomers has a white flower, but just a perfect little setting for this. We should never have to worry about it having enough space. We may eventually have to do just a little bit of pruning as it gets closer to that Colorado spruce, but just a great plant to have in your landscape. And right below, look at that little spruce tree. This came up on its own. That little guy right there, that just self-seeded. So now we have to make a choice. What are we going to do with something like this? I'm just going to leave it. I'll probably even maybe just start shearing it, keep it a little bit of a compact evergreen in this area. I don't think I'd have much luck transplanting it. By the time you move all these rocks, take the chance. I think it would just be better just to create something unique out of this. Now, I just absolutely love how a landscape bed looks with that fresh mold. I like that golden brown, and that's what you get with the western red cedar and the cypress. If you are going to top dress every year, you do have to be careful that eventually you can build up almost too much mulch. If you start getting up into that 4-inch range, you can actually create underneath the mulch kind of an impervious layer. So my goal, I usually want about 2 to 3 inches before I get down to the soil. That's about exactly what we've got here. That way on a heavy rain, it can work its way through the mulch. The other thing about top dressing, rather than top dressing, a lot of times I'll just come in and I'll stir up the mulch. You get that lower layer, it brings that golden brown back to the surface. So that's definitely another option. Once I go through and I do this mixing like this, if the golden brown's all gone, it's thin, then I'll go ahead and I'll top dress those areas to shoot for that 2 to 3 inch uniformity. So it's nice to get an early start cleaning up this bed. It sure makes spring a lot more enjoyable when we're not so rushed to finish all our gardening chores. As always, thanks for watching Garden Hike. I appreciate it. We'll see you again next video.